It's been a while since I've thought of adding a new segment to the channel where I'm just recording my screen while working on a random project. For instance, I wanted to make this scene ready for the next tutorial where I'm going to talk to you about Corona volumetric fog, and I just said, why not record this part, right? And then decided to make it a challenge and do everything in just 1 hour. It'll be an interesting title also, so why not? I didn't exactly do it in one go. I took a few breaks in the middle to have a coffee or whatever, but in the end the length of the video was almost 1 hour. So here's how it goes. The cabins model is a free object that I've downloaded from 3dsky, and you can find the link in the description. All the vegetations and the ground material are from the bridge, Megascans, and I've touched that subject in one of my other tutorials and you can find it right here. One more thing that I have to mention is that I had most of these assets ready in the scene before I start working on it. So I started with a plane and gave it a little bit of topography with the soft selection. When I had the base ground geometry ready, gave it a little bit of subdivision where it was necessary and visible in my camera view, and just added some more details with the push and pull. Push and pull is just a very basic sculpting feature that's been built into 3dsMax for a long time now. You just give it a brush size and a strength value, so every time that you click and drag your mouse around, it will leave its mark on the geometry with the size and value that's been given to it. Then I just applied the material that I've downloaded from the bridge to my ground, gave it a UVW modifier, and my base ground was basically ready. And just to see if it looks good or not, I had to have a light source in the scene, so I just simply used the very sun and sky, and it was looking good for now. Then it was time to add some vegetation into the scene, and for that I used the forest pack to scatter my models around the scene, and also use the paint tool in the area section to scatter them where I want them to be. Then I just mess around with the distribution and transform settings to just randomize them so they look realistic. After that, it was time to use some of these detailed mossy ground models that I downloaded from the bridge in the foreground to give it more detail so it looks more realistic. So I arranged them in the scene from my camera view and they were looking pretty good. Then I just added a couple of these trunks and rocks here and there, and I had to scale them a little bit since they were pretty tiny. Ran another render. They were looking pretty nice, but the biggest missing part in the scene was the grass, and for that I used another forest object and one of its lawn presets, and here's the result. Looks way better, right? To avoid having unnecessary grass objects in the scene, I enabled the limit to visibility option in the grass forest object, and by doing that I stopped the forest to generate grass anywhere out of my camera view. It's a pretty cool feature, you should try it. Okay, it's time to add some trees into the scene. I got these models from one of the Max tree packs, already converted them into proxies, and just scattered them around the scene with another forest object the same way that I did with the ferns. But this time, I scattered them all over the place and got rid of the trees that were in front of the camera by adding a brushed area and exclude that area so I don't get any trees there and I have a clear view of the cabin. Alright, it was time to mess around with the frame buffer adjustments to see if I can make the render look better, and it was actually successful. In the render, I noticed that the background looks very empty, so I decided to expand the ground geometry and add a little bit of more trees back there so it looks a bit richer. I figured that I have to have a pathway towards the cabin like what I have in my reference image, and I did it simply by adding an excluded brush area in my grass forest and just painted a pathway towards the cabin like this. Now that I could see the ground material, I realized it could use a stronger displacement, so I just bumped up the values and it looked a lot more realistic afterward. Since I still had some ferns in the pathway, I had to add another excluded area in the forest object and just paint them out. Then I decided to have a sitting area somewhere around here, so I had to get rid of these grass and ferns in this area as well. Then just tried to make it level with the push and pull, but that didn't work, so I just did it by scaling all the vertices along the z-axis and then added some detail to that area with the push and pull. Obviously, I needed some furniture, but the time was tight and I decided to get some help from the Chaos Cosmos. There weren't many options there and I had to go with this one, which was obviously the only choice that I had. Just made a copy of that and decided to download a tree trunk from the bridge and make a couple of seats out of that. I rendered the scene, everything was looking good except I was missing some depth in the image. So I decided to add a very simple volumetric fog into the scene, nothing crazy, just as simple as it gets. Time was tight, so I just added some elements into the element tab and started rendering. Don't tell anybody, but I didn't include their rendering time into that 1 hour, and I wasn't even around when it was rendering. So the render was finished and I had to do some post-production. I had already spent 56 minutes on making the scene and I was freaking out, so I had to act fast. This is what I did. First of all, I color corrected the vegetation, gave them a little bit of contrast and made them a bit darker. Then I made the cabin a bit darker by adding some contrast to it because it was totally washed out. Then I thought this scene needs a couple of people, a little bit of storytelling. The 1 hour was already finished, but there was no way I could leave it without this lovely couple. So I just put them into the image, did a little bit of color correction and tried to make them like they belong to this image. They could have looked better, but I was failing miserably. I had to just finish it. So a final touch, camera raw filter. A little bit of clarity, stronger highlights, brighten the dark areas, a little bit of color adjustment and a tiny bit of vignette effect, and that was it. Mission failed successfully. It's been officially 1 hour and 4 minutes, so apparently I miscalculated something and I couldn't do it under 1 hour, and the title of this video is just a lie. Sorry about that. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you like this type of content, and if you want to support me to continue making these videos, you can do it over my Patreon page and I would really appreciate that. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Okay, take care, see you soon.